This Week in Startups is brought to you by Cisco Spark. Get video meetings, team messaging, digital whiteboarding, file sharing, and calling all in one secure app. Visit ciscospark.com to learn more and sign up for free.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. My guest this week, none other than Kevin Kelly, the founding co-founder of Wired, author, futurist, publisher of the Holos Review, if you can remember back to the 80s, of course, Cool Tools, and advisor for the one movie, Kevin, that I think anticipates when you watch Minority Report today, it just nails so much, doesn't it? You were...
Be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, it's my pleasure to have you finally. Looking back at that movie, what do you think, why did that movie get so much right? I'm trying to think about what year Minority Report came out, 2002, 2003?
Somewhere around there, yeah. Spielberg gathered a whole bunch of, the usual circle of futurists, Jaron Lanier, myself, Neil Gerstenfeld, Stuart Brand, Peter Schwartz, into Shutter's hotel on the beach for a weekend and said, I want a plausible 2050. And so we started waving our arms and saying, there'll be this or that. He says, no. He says, I want to know what does the bed look like? What do people have for breakfast? What's the music? Because he wanted the details, and that actually was really what forced everybody to kind of be a little bit more specific. And I think it was one of the reasons why he at least got the world pretty accurately. And I thought the idea of precogs was totally insane and implausible. But as we go along nowadays, it seems like it's not so impossible.
In a way, precogs, when you think about it, which in the movie were these weird beings in some gelatinous pool.
Right, they were mutants.
They were mutants of some type, exactly. They never really explained it fully, but they could perceive what was going to happen in people's intentions before those people even knew they would become murderers. And I guess that was the sort of core Hitchcockian kind of approach to it. But if you look at it today, I think we'd all agree that AI, machine learning, is starting to anticipate what our questions are in the future. And you talk about that a little bit in your book, The Inevitable.
Half of that is that we're tracked so much. That was the thing that we didn't really anticipate, is that our lives are being tracked so much that you could then do that calculation based on your little micro movements and what you're doing and what you have been doing. You could make an extrapolation saying, it looks like you're going to commit a crime. And that was the part that I think we didn't really expect. Or at least
and a lot of it's based on big data. They didn't really get like the smartphone. They were actually just following everybody by their retina scans constantly for advertising, which was another, when you think about it, personalized advertising and retargeting, which we all take for granted now, was featured in the movie. I wonder who came up with that, the retargeting.
Brand.
Stuart Brand. Yeah.
And I was one of the people talking about the standing up gesture interface to computers, that we wouldn't just be talking to them with our fingertips, we'd be using our whole bodies to communicate.
Yeah, when he's pinching and zooming and pulling out, conducting. Yeah, it's like he's a conductor, exactly. And he's got that like unique skill. So for people who don't know you, because we have like this whole generation of young entrepreneurs, 20-somethings, let's set the stage a little bit. How did you start your career in technology, and how did you become Kevin Kelly, like this sort of famous, futurist, et cetera? Like, obviously one doesn't set out to be a famous futurist, I don't think.
No, and I'm completely unqualified in every respect. So I'm a college dropout. I was a photographer in Asia. I started writing about travel, and I got myself invited onto one of the earliest experimental online systems, New Jersey Institute of Technology, in around 1982. And I was reporting on it as if this online world of bulletin boards and experimental networks were a new country. I was a travel writer, and I was reporting on this new country emerging, and I wrote a cover story for a New Age journal called Network Nation in 1984, just describing this new place and the culture around it. And so I came into it, I guess, as an observer, and I got hired. I got hired at the Whole Earth Catalog to work on the magazine, and while I was there, I had an epiphany online. And the epiphany was that I have been kind of anti-technology, like a lot of hippies, but I saw an organic side of technology inside the networks. I saw something humane and organic, and that, as I explored that new version, that new face of technology, I became more and more interested in the other stuff. So we got involved in starting the Well. I was around for that, where we started the Well, and then I started with Stuart, the first Hackers Conference, and I had the first VR Jamboree in 1989. And so I came in through the cultural side of it. And even Wired, which I later went on to start with Lewis and Jane and John Patel, that was really about the culture around technology. It was not about the technology itself. So I came through the cultural side, looking at this as an extension of the humanities, really, rather than from the tech side.
And in those days, people looked at the internet, online services, this new world that was emerging, as something that would net be a positive force in humanity, humans understanding each other, increasing communication, the sharing of knowledge, information wants to be free. Do you still, now that we're 30, 40 years after a lot of this, do you still feel that the internet is net's this amazing, powerful force, or have you in some ways feel like it's a squandered opportunity or become bitter to it in some way, watching what's happened with, say, Facebook and fake news and the manipulation of people online to sort of send them down rabbit holes and reinforce maybe ugly beliefs they have, as opposed to maybe opening up their minds?
I have always believed that it was a net gain, and I still today believe it's a net gain. However, the net gain is small. In other words, I think we, on average, globally, create a little bit more than we destroy each year, but not by much. And I think even if it's just 1%, I think that 1% compounded over annually is civilization. That there is a little bit more good than bad in the world, but not by much. But that not by much turns out to be all that we need to be hopeful and to believe in progress. So I think progress is real. I believe that the net gain from the internet is greater than the net negative. However, it may not be very much difference. 1%. And 1% is almost invisible when you go out and look at the world. You see 49% crap and harm. 1% good. That doesn't look like there's a huge net gain, but I think we don't need very much to actually compound it over year after year to make progress. And so I'm not a blind optimist. I'm a kind of a realist, but I think if you're a realist, you have to agree that there has been a net gain.
Yeah, and if you're playing a game of chance, or we were playing some game heads up, and this game was the world, and I had a 1% edge on you, if we're playing the game once, it's not a big edge. But if we're playing 100 hands of poker, every 2 hours or every night, somebody's going to lose all their money real quick.
Right, and the other game you want to play is if you could be born as a random person anywhere in the world, a random color, a random gender, which way do you want to go? Do you want to be born 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or do you want to be born last year? And last year is a lot better than 20 years ago for most people, most places in the world. So I think there is a net gain. That's not to say that these problems aren't real, but I believe that actually progress is propelled by problems. Problems that make progress. Problems are opportunities. And each new thing we make, including the internet, including AI, is going to produce almost as many problems as it solves. But those problems are just opportunities for new solutions. And those new solutions will themselves create new problems. And so we have an expansion of problems, but that means an expansion of progress as well.
All right, when we get back from our quick break, I want to talk about the forces, in your great new book, The Inevitable. It's not exactly new, it's been out for a little bit, but in the Inevitable, you talk about the forces, not specifically the technologies, but the forces that are driving this, which I want to get into those forces and maybe talk a little bit about AI and even what's happening in terms of trying to figure out what is the truth given all the misinformation going on in the world and trying to find truth when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey, everybody. I'm super excited about our latest partner on This Week in Startups. It's called Cisco Spark. From Cisco, you know Cisco. Of course you know Cisco. Cisco Spark is a new meeting platform and a communication platform for teams. And we're using it here at This Week in Startups, and it is life-changing. It can make working together so easy, so pleasant. And in this package, for one low price of free, you get, yes, that's right, free, you get video meetings, team messaging, like chat, you know how that works, digital whiteboarding, I'm going to get into that in a minute, file sharing, and calling. All of this together in one secure app that works on any of your devices, Android, tablet, iPad, iPhone, desktop, you get the idea. And it's the fastest way to host and join meetings, and it works with industry-leading video systems like, yes, the Cisco Spark board. I have the Cisco Spark board, and this is a touch-based, all-in-one device where literally I click and I say, everybody who's in this room, like a chat room, everybody in this Cisco Spark room, I want you to join this video conference. Somebody could be at home, another person could be in a hotel or on the road, on their phone, on the BART. Two people could be in the New York office, two people could be in the San Francisco office. All of a sudden, we're all in one space on the Cisco Spark board with all of our files from that chat room. And we can then pick an image like we did for the launch festival and start drawing on it and saying, hey, let's move these tables here. It is amazing. And the Cisco Spark board comes in 55 inches or 70 inches. It's kind of like an all-in-one touchscreen whiteboard camera with amazing microphones where if you're in the back of the room, it picks you up perfectly. And the video quality, it makes you feel like you're in the same room without having to spend what used to be, I think, $250,000 or $50,000 to outfit a room. You can now do it for low thousands of dollars. It's pretty amazing. I love my Cisco Spark board. And on this very program, This Week in Startups, we're going to start putting Cisco Spark boards in other cities so that entrepreneurs and investors from, say, New York, Los Angeles, maybe London, Berlin, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Seoul, can then video conference into the show, and we can start doing remotes with startups from around the world. How exciting is that? All powered by Cisco Spark and the Cisco Spark board. If you want to see all this exciting stuff and try the software, go to ciscospark.com, ciscospark.com to learn more and sign up for free. Thanks for joining the team, Cisco. Let's get back to this amazing program. Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest, none other than Kevin Kelly, famous futurist, author, and worked on the whole Earth catalog or review?
Both.
What was the
whole
difference?
Software catalog and then the quarterly magazine that used to be called Coevolution Quarterly, but was changed during the beginning of the .com era to the Whole Earth Review.
Well, for people who don't know, Stuart Brandon, what he sort of contributed to all this, was he the one who sort of got you into all this and hired you as a writer, or?
Yeah, in many ways. Actually, I believe I was the very first person hired online. Stuart, I had as I said, I got an early invitation to an experimental online system that Stuart was on. I started to write online, and I had a voice that worked online. Stuart hired me with an email in 1983, and I came out to California to work on the magazine. And I think Stuart had a very pivotal role because he was sort of the intellectual voice of the 60s and hippies who had rejected technology in many ways, and except for the do-it-yourself version. And he was instrumental in casting computers as personal computers, as devices that would augment what you were doing and would augment humanity. And rather than as the big oppressor, the big machine, the big, the punch, do not fold or staple. But I think because of his incorporation and embrace of personal computers very early on, he tipped the balance slightly in favor of people giving it a chance and to see them as tools of augmentation and enhancement rather than oppression. And so I blame a lot of what's happened on his little nudge.
And in a way, what he was thinking about, eventually now we talk about the singularity and the massive augmenting of humanity. We're not quite to putting computers into our brains yet, but that seems to be something that could happen in our lifetime. And AI suddenly feels like it could become, in some way, sentient. I mean, we're in vertical AI, we're having chess masters, poker masters, Go masters getting beaten handily, and even every video game being learned, as you account in the book with DeepMind, beating all that. But you seem to believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this AI revolution is real but manageable. And some people are sounding alarms. Elon seems to think, hey, this could get out of control. Where do you stand on this sort of, I think what you call it soft singularity in the book?
Yeah. So I believe that our humans have a very strong misconception about our own selves, our own intelligence. And we believe things like IQ as if intelligence was a single dimension, and it's multidimensional and it's a gradient. And we believe other aspects of ourselves which lead us in a wrong direction in understanding what's happening with AI. So I think AI is absolutely real, absolutely the most important thing going on. It's going to be transformative. It's going to be the equal and superior to what electricity, automation, reading, maybe even fire did. But I think the idea that there is this superhuman intelligence is definitionally just wrong-headed and misleading. And that the better way to think about AI is imagining millions of different kinds of intelligences that are operating and that we're working with, and that just as you cannot have a general purpose tool that does everything perfectly, you can't have an AI that general purpose that does everything perfectly, because even our own intelligences aren't general purpose. This is, again, a misunderstanding. We see ourselves as this general purpose intelligence that can solve. Well, we have a very, very specialized intelligence that's evolved on this planet to serve for our survival. And once we start to invent a million other kinds of intelligences, we'll realize that our intelligence is way off in a corner. It's not at the center. It's one weird kind of intelligence out of the millions possible. So the vision I have is this kind of diversity of different types of intelligences, all of them engineered to do different things. Some of them may be engineered to be kind of your generic Vegematic or your Swiss Army knife, meaning that it doesn't do very many things very well, but there's a lot of them okay. And that the idea that there's one thing better than us, or that we're on this linear ladder, is just a superstition left over from a pre-Darwinian idea that we're in a kind of a hierarchy, and we're not. So I want to have a more robust, more scientifically evidence-based view, and if you do that, then the idea of this sort of strong singularity where we reach this kind of AI that's better than us and they can make something better than us, and then it also will, by thinking about things, solve problems. That's what I call thinkism. This is a fallacy that you can actually solve problems just by thinking about them. You could have the smartest AI in the world that read all the medical literature that we have right now. You're not going to solve cancer by thinking about it. You still have to have data and experiments, and they take time. So thinkism is one of the fallacies of middle-aged white guys who like to think, and they think that if they think about things strong enough, they're going to solve these problems. And so I think there's just lots of things wrapped up in this, but that a better view is to imagine a zoo of different AIs, of different characteristics, and we're working together with them, and there may be problems in business or science that are too difficult for our own minds to think, and we will work with other types of thinking to solve those problems. And I think we're going to be working with these much more than working against them.
And yeah, I mean, I like the analogy of the zoo. And what's nice about that one is that they're all kind of contained. But you may not want to jump in the Tiger AI pen. It could be dangerous, like one isolated one. If somebody decides they're going to make a drone, for example, that is just amazing at learning how to target people and kill them, it's going to be a pretty effective tool.
I mean, and we certainly will weaponize this. I mean, I'm not saying this is all kumbaya. I mean, we will, unfortunately, there's never been a technology that we've not weaponized, and we for certain will weaponize AI, and there will be AIs that will be harmful to us in ways that we can't even anticipate. So that has to go into the equation. We should absolutely try to, as a society, minimize that. But still, the net gain from all the other things that AI will bring us will be good. And the question that Elon and others are asking is, can we control? Will this be out of our control? And it's long been out of our control. We're we've already passed that threshold. We're wholly dependent on our technology and we don't control it. So we have an existence proof of this, and that's called children. It's like, how do let me give you this proposition. We're going to make these beings that have free will and are really smart, and they can self-replicate. How are you going to control them?
Yeah.
It's called children, and you have parenting and training, and that's how you do it. And that's how we're going to work with our AIs, is that we're going to have to transfer to them our values. And I think the whole subset of AI we're concerned about ethics, morality, is very, very valid, but it's even more than that. Is how do we instill into those kinds of transferable values? And that actually turns out to be not difficult. The difficult part is that we don't know what values we want to transmit. We don't. Our own ethics are very shallow. Our own ethics are very inconsistent. Our own ethics are not very robust. And so we first have to figure out what it is that we want to transfer it. Then we can transfer it pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, the only flaw I see in this argument of the children is the equivalent would be a child who comes out of the gate at being able to beat their parent at every game, every piece of knowledge in the world handily. I mean, this is a child who would be hard to manage, which I think actually was part of Spielberg's AI concept. Is that it's going to be pretty hard to manage a being or an entity that is just that much smarter or adept than you.
Right. A place I might disagree is this idea of coming out of the gate, because I think this is actually very difficult to do. It will take many, many years, and so we have that prospect right now to be working on it. And I think AI, in many ways, is one of the most surprising technologies, because I don't think there's ever been a technology where we have debated its consequences so much before it even arrived. We didn't do that with plastics or fire or printing, where we had like 2 decades of people wringing their hands and really worrying about what would happen when it came. Yeah. This is the first technology where we've actually done the rehearsal and are really trying to think about the consequences before it even exists. And so it's not going to happen in a year or 2 years or even 10 years where there's this where this AI is born that can beat every game. That's going to take at least a decade or more, which gives us time to actually do the things that we need to do.
And I wonder why it is that we're so hyper-focused on AI. Is it, in your mind, because it is such an amazingly transformative technology and concept, or is it that we've all just become so obsessed and aware of what the next wave will be because we've seen 3 or 4 waves and the impact it has, that we're sort of techno-fetishists, and we're obsessed over it?
No, I think it's because it so much mirrors us. This is an identity crisis. I mean, this is the closest thing that we will have to meeting ET, an alien. So who? I'm sure there's aliens in the universe, but who knows when and if we'll meet them. But we're for certain going to have that contact with an alien as we make our own mind children. And so the effects of these is going to be the equivalent to having contact with an alien civilization, because they're a kind of us. And each advance that we do in AI causes us to reconsider and redefine ourselves. And so we're in this perpetual identity crisis. That's why it's so riveting to us, is because it's changing us.
It's a mirror.
Make it AI. It's a mirror. That's a magic mirror, because it's not just reflecting us, but it's changing us at the same time. We're having to redefine us, and not just in a kind of trivial way. We actually are remaking ourselves.
And in,
changing ourselves in response to what we have made. So we're undergoing a transformation with this magic mirror. So that's why this is such a fundamentally important and exhilarating and threatening and frightening and scary thing, because it is changing us in a radical way.
and you talk about that change in the near term in the book, where we are all being pounded with a deluge of the stupidest things people ever could consider doing that are now captured on camera and shipped around the world. And also the most fascinating of, like how literally it's amazing that this person is summiting Yosemite or whatever, El Capitan, without a rope. And we all get to see and say, we never thought somebody could climb
right.
This north face of El Capitan or whatever it was that Alex Hummel did recently. I'm sure you are aware of it because, as you point out in the book, something so colossal that it exceeds what our comprehension is of the world would have been a myth in earlier existence. And now it's a fact. We see it on video and go, wow, somebody just climbed El Capitan without a rope.
Right. But what that says is that I am capable of that in some ways. It's like humans. It's like, when you see little kids that do the cup stacking, that are so fast you can't even see their movements. That's us. But we can do that. And we didn't have that in our definition of humans, was capable of that kind of superhuman speed or being able to ascend below oxygen levels or above oxygen levels or whatever, or free dive down to the bottom. We didn't believe that humans could do that. And now every day we see evidence that, we're much more malleable. We're much more potentially powerful than we thought. So that means that it changes my picture of me. And so that's, again, why it's so powerful.
And it can also have a detrimental effect. I mean, if people are watching Instagram every day and seeing everybody live these epic lives where I was literally thinking, Kevin, like, I'm going to hire a Photoshop person to take a picture of me at every great monument around the world, Photoshop me into the most amazing moments. Like, here I am at, the Great Wall of China. And I was thinking about posting it every day with a picture of a private jet in between and just trolling the internet for 365 days to see if anybody picked up on that this isn't even possible to go around the globe. But it does seem like when you open up Instagram, it makes you feel bad that right now you're not at Coachella or not at the Eclipse or not at Burning Man. Talk a little bit about the impact this is having on us psychologically, because we know this big impact of what AI could be, but it seems like we're going through some little psychological tortures right now, or existential, duress because of the internet. You talk about it in the book. Talk about it here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely true. One of the huge, I think, the unrecognized greater trend happening right now is that we are assembling a planetary culture, a planetary machine, a planetary superorganism, if you want, a planetary something, where millions of people are connected, day and night, and that is shifting our perceptions of us and what we do, and there's a lot of hurt and conflict and pain as we become connected all the time, and I think there's going to be lots of weirdnesses caused by being connected all the time. But I also think there's this huge potential of stuff that we could do. I was completely, riveted or thrilled or exhilarated by the Reddit April Fool's performance last year, where they had a pixel war. They had 1 million pixels that people could control, and in 72 hours, 1 million people participated in making this performance piece with moving pixels. And it's trivial in terms of what it accomplished, but it was really profound in what it showed could be done with 1 million people working and collaborating together. That's just 1 million. Facebook has 2 billion people connected. Yeah. Imagine what 2 billion people could do together with these new tools that would allow them to collaborate in ways that simply would not be possible in the physical world, and what that has in store for us. So, and there will certainly be weirdnesses when 1 million people decide to turn on you, right?
Yeah.
When you have a flash mob of 2 billion people, that's really going to suck.
Yeah, and we've seen that now when people on Twitter will they'll destroy somebody's life in an instance over a tweet or a misstep or a video of them doing their worst moment of their life. They get judged by it forever.
So we're going to have to figure out what the etiquette is. I mean, this goes back to the culture. There's a culture here. It's not just technology. We have to learn how to do it. You and I spent 4 to 5 years learning how to do this thing called read and write. It didn't happen overnight. It was actually a deliberate practice that we had to be taught how to do it. That was kind of a literacy. And why do we expect that people will learn how to do social media or being connected, that we'll do this naturally just by hanging out? We may have to be taught it. It may take us 4 or 5 years of study and learning and teaching to actually acquire the skills to navigate this thing. So this may be a new literacy that we have to learn how to do. Of course, we don't even, as adults, know how to do it, but we can figure that out. So there's going to be an etiquette, a literacy that we will require to be able to work together in the billions and not hurt each other. And I think that's very exciting. It won't happen overnight. There'll be a lot of missteps, but I think it's possible, and that's what civilization is about.
That's fascinating. I love talking to you because it gives me like a million different startup ideas. I was just thinking, imagine if there was a startup, a social network like Facebook or Twitter, where in order to join the network, you had to go through an hour, just 1 hour of online training of, here's empathy. Here's how you make people feel. Judge which one of these sentences is the most truthful. Just basically taking people through truth and kindness and empathy and how to interact online and have a productive discourse. There would be a line out the door of people waiting to go to a place where you needed a license, essentially, a licensing exam of how to interact with people. But now we're faced with a president, and I don't want to make this political, but we should talk about it because in a way, what Trump did was hack this social network and these social norms to be in office and control the media space. When you look at a demagogue, and I'm not sure where you sit on the spectrum of how you feel about Trump, but somebody who has essentially hacked social media in order to activate a base of people who are at the short end of the stick when it comes to employment and the changes that are occurring in the world, and he activated them in order to essentially create chaos in the world. I don't know if that's his explicit goal, but it is the net result here 7-8 months into this tendency. How do you look at how Facebook helped him, social media helped him activate the space, and what does that say about, sort of the future of these tools?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. I would say, the internet, cell phones are so much bigger than Trump that doesn't really make any difference. He's evidence of the last gasp of the industrial age. That's not to say that there is a huge opportunity and challenge before us as we try to build in some truth signaling layer into the internet. So I think we can imagine ways in which we can bring in the network to actually assign truthiness to statements. And so I imagine we'll get to the point where we'll see, okay, this statement has a 95% probability of being true based on the sources, based on who asserts what. And so you have like a page ranking for sources. You have a citation indexing system that weighs the weight of the sources and the weight of those who agree with those sources. And then this statement might have a 25% probability of being true. I think we will bake into this some of those kinds of fixes to help guide us in as these information is passing around. It won't cure everything, but this is the biological system. We won't get rid of all cancer. We won't get rid of all pathogens. We would just reduce them to some minimal layer. And the same thing with anonymity, which I think is like a toxic metal that is absolutely essential in very small doses and toxic at large doses. And so you want to keep it to a minimum. And so
whistleblowers seems like a good idea.
You need them. They're essential, just like you need cadmium and arsenic in your cells. But any significant dosage is toxic, and so they have to be kept present, but at a minimum. And so I think we do the same thing with reputations and sources. So right now, the only thing you can believe is you can't believe any video you see because it can
Right.
be manipulated. You can't believe any photograph or anything anybody says because sound can be manipulated.
Right.
The only thing you can actually come back to is how reliable is the source been over time? How dependable is that source over time and in the past? And
So reputation.
its reputation. In the end, that's what the New York Times. That's all they have in the end.
And when let's segue. I think it's a good segue into employment because the nature of truth has changed radically now that anybody can produce a video of Obama saying, some horrible thing, or even more nefarious, saying something that mixes lies with truth, so that it seems plausible, but that it's abhorrent or leads people down a certain direction. But employment is one that I think intelligent people in technology are actually split on. It's another one of these split issues like AI. And I'm curious where you sit. We have 30 million Americans, and I'm just taking this from an American perspective because it's what I know best, but 30 million Americans in retail jobs and driving trucks and taxis. Those jobs, some large percentage will go away. I think we both agree. Will they be replaced? And will we be looking at a world where we have to think about post-employment or new types of employment? And what does Trump's presidency and this insanity that we're going through say about our ability to navigate something as complex as, employment imploding, possibly, 10, 20 million jobs going away in a very vicious, fast way?
Sure. So I think when we talk about employment, we should talk about sort of the near term, which I would consider the next 50 years.
Yep.
And the short term, which is the next 500 years.
Right.
I think I'm on the side of radical optimists who think that we are going to be headed into a period where there is more employment than ever before for humans. And that this technology not only will basically transform, modify every single job and touch every single possible industry that we can imagine. I can't imagine anything from sports to religion to entertainment to education that will not be affected by it. At the same time, I think that the effect is not just going to be jobs that are transformed. There will be some jobs that are lost, but there will be far, far, far more new occupations, more niches made than ever before. And this is not just about people who have intellectual college degrees, because a lot of what we're moving to is experience-based. It relies on the fact that as more and more of the machine-made becomes a commodity and cheaper, we value the serendipitous, the hand-drawn, the human interactions, the human touch. And so just being a human becomes even more valuable than before, particularly over beyond the 50-year horizon when the total population on this planet starts to drop and there are going to be fewer and fewer humans around anywhere on the planet. And so I think that this technology is going to surprise us by how many new opportunities that it affords. And to the near-term replacements of like truck drivers and stuff, I also think that that's not going to come as fast as people think, and that there is plenty of time to retrain people. And people say, well, those people don't want to be retrained, but we have an existence proof with the U.S. military that can retrain people who have almost no skills at scale, in bulk, and give them highly technical skills. We know that we can do that. So this is just a political thing about whether we want to do that. But we have the technology that we can know that we can take people who have very few skills and give them very high-tech skills in mass, in bulk. Okay? So that can be done. And the people who are driving trucks probably want it to be done, would like it to be done. So it's a matter of coming back to the politics. Will we choose to do that?
And what will motivate us to do it, I guess, is the other question. I mean, we had a whole election cycle where coal miners seem to be like the obsession of what do we do with these 76,000 people who work in the coal industry, which, by the way, is the same number of people who work in the skiing industry, the bowling industry, nail salons, and breweries and wineries. It's about the exact same footprint within plus or minus 5,000. I mean, more just as a 20% more people work in museums than coal mines. And we're not sitting here obsessing over what do we do about the docents and the ticket, and the security at the museums and not needing as many because of video cameras. We could easily retrain these people.
Yeah, it's so ironic that a lot of these jobs that politicians are fighting over are really jobs that humans should not be doing, and in 100 years from now, we'll be ashamed that humans had ever done. Like
sending them into a mine, counting money, or sending them into a dirty mine to die, right? A slow death.
Seen as like, why were you fighting over these jobs when anybody would understand that this was simply inhumane, and so I think we'll be relieved, but I think you're right in terms of like what is going to force us. And we're talking about Americans here, and I think the answer actually may be other countries. I mean, I think other countries will start to do this, and we'll be shamed into it's like, if China can do this, because China's going to do this. People don't realize that China is not very far behind the U.S. in its need to retrain its workforce, and it's committed to making the robots for the world. And the only way you can make robots is with humans right now.
Right.
And so a lot of the truck drivers are probably going to be making robots. And they will be trained to do that. And so, some of the version of capitalism that China is working on may have lessons for the U.S.
All right. My guest this week is Kevin Kelly, author of his most recent book, The Inevitable. Go buy it right now. The Audible is great. I've been listening to it. And thanks to our friends at Cisco for sponsoring This Week in Startups and the great Spark board that they've been gearing us up with. Kevin, you've become big in China. You're not big in Japan, but you're big in China. Maybe you are big in Japan too, but you're big in China, and this happened through an odd course of events. Tell the audience how you became big in China and what you've learned in your time in China, because you've been going there for quite a while.
I have been. So my first book was called Out of Control, and it actually talked about how to make decentralized systems, peer-to-peer systems, in the early 90s. And it was never really adopted very much in the U.S. It came too early. But there was a crowdsourced translation into Chinese that was published maybe about 6 years ago or so. And it came at the right moment in China when all the internet entrepreneurs like Pony Ma, Jack Ma were thinking about their businesses. And they read this Chinese translation of my book, and they were hugely influenced by it. It inspired them to make Alibaba and Tencent and WeChat. And they started to talk about the book. And China has a little bit of kind of a herd mentality, and so everybody in China has to read it. And so I am now the Alvin Toffler of China. And so I go there a lot, and I've been throughout the country from not just the eastern seaboard, but way into the villages where I've been exploring to kind of get a sense of China. And I have to tell you that Americans just don't appreciate how fast the Chinese are moving, and they have certainly been a copy culture like America was during the British imperial era. They've been copying everything, but they are now moving away from that copy culture into a true innovation culture. They've went to American gurus and they said, how do we innovate? And the American gurus had a checklist. And they say, you do this. You have science fairs. You have incubation stuff. You do this. And they
hackathons,
hackathons. And they're going down the list doing all of them, and it works. And so they're now trying very hard to really, really implement a large-scale innovation culture. It's really difficult because they have to accomplish what America accomplished in a century. They're going to try and accomplish in 10 years. But I think the world's going to be surprised in the next 5 years when there will be some Chinese-made consumer item that everybody in the world wants because it's the best in the world. Maybe it's an electric car. Maybe it's an AI, a robot. I don't know what it is. But they're going to make something like the iPhone that everybody wants.
So they will export something, because to date we haven't had, it's not like we go about our daily days and have some consumer brand or entertainment or even enterprise software or business that we go, oh my God, this is incredible, and it's from China. But you think that's the next change, is that they'll be exporting culture?
Right. They'll be exporting culture, exactly, just like the Japanese did.
Yep.
When I was a kid, made in Japan was the equivalent of made in China today. It was like, this is crap.
Garbage. Yeah.
And then they went into Walkman, Sony,
Yeah.
Nikons, and it was like, oh, this is like Japanese cars. This is what I drive.
It's the best. Yeah.
China's going to go through the same transition, but even faster.
Interesting. Out of Control, you wrote, was that in the 90s at some point? But you didn't actually, even though you saw these sort of hive-like minds and collaboration, when you first saw Wikipedia and Nupedia, you didn't actually believe in it, did you? You didn't think this could work. Take us through what you missed. What did you miss about that? Was it your editorial experience that worked against you, or?
Well, the first version of Nupedia wasn't very good because you actually had to submit an article to the editors who had to approve it, and it was time-consuming. And who are these guys anyway? And they're making changes, and so it just didn't work. And I just kind of, at that point, my mind was poisoned, and I kind of ignored it. So Wikipedia came out of the fact that there was a side wiki, which the editors were using to write Nupedia, working.
It was their scratch pad. Yeah.
It was a scratch pad. But the stuff on the side, the internal tool, they found incredibly useful. And the people who had access to it were saying, this is better.
Yeah.
This immediate first draft is good enough. Why don't we just publish that? So that came out. And so when it came out, though, it's like, how can that possibly scale? How can that possibly work? And I think Clay Shirky explained it to me, which was that it was the revert button. That it was just easier to revert back to something that was vandalized than it was to vandalize it. So it took less energy to revert something, to restore it, than it did to vandalize it.
Right.
So you had a kind of like a energetically biased system, and it was biased to what was good. And so it still seems to me to be something that's impossible in theory and only works in practice. And I think a lot of the things that we're going to be headed into in the next 20 years are going to reflect the same way. And the reason why Wikipedia works is that it's harnessing humans at a new scale.
Right.
Scale of millions. And I really believe that that's going to be where most of the surprises are going to come. Facebook is a surprise because it was harnessing humans collaborating together in the billions. And I think this space before us, of all the things that we could do working together with 1 million people working on something, which is small, it's like a thousandth of a billion. Just 1 million people working together on something is going to be able to produce things that are going to shock us and say that's impossible. So we have to believe in the impossible more often. YouTube is a consequence of that scaling. The fact that we have access to all the extremity in the billions or the millions of humans makes something new that seems impossible to us. So I think all these impossible things are going to come out of this new zillionics, this new scale of having things connected and working together in some fashion. And we're going to be surprised one thing after another as entrepreneurs figure out how to harness this new scale that has never been before been possible.
And why do you think it is now that we have this massive groundswell and this change happening in the world that dictatorships, people living in non-democracies, seems to be the sticky thing that doesn't change, right? Information wants to be free. You guys started Wired, and it seemed like, hey, the internet is going to be this, incredible tsunami that's just going to roll over dictators and make it impossible to be one because the information and what's happening in those countries will easily come out. And now we look at something like China, it seems to be doing a real balancing act between whatever flavor of capitalism they have, but not democracy. So maybe you could speak to why every other statistic in the world seems to be going really well, and this one seems pretty sticky.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, this was John Gilmore. It's the internet routes around censorship.
Right.
Well, it doesn't really. Look at China, right? China has maintained a firewall of censorship very effectively, much more effectively than anybody thought. But in some ways, and let me say something in defense of China, which is that one of the things that they have sort of done is they've acquired true names. They've bypassed anonymity and saying, if you want to say something on a social media, you have to stand by your true name. And that really, let me tell you, that really eliminates a lot of the trolling in the world.
Yeah.
It does eliminate a lot of the rumors. And so, in a certain sense, they're trying an alternative experiment. And I think it's to our detriment to ignore it or to assume that it can't work. And there may be things that we can learn from that. So, as we iterate what capitalism is, it may be that the American version is actually not necessarily at the peak, and that we have an opportunity to kind of reimagine how it works. So I think the reason why we just don't have we have not steamrollered over all the tyrants of the world is because there are probably more things that are important to people than just being able to gab on a social system or to purchase what you want anytime you want it. So there are still other human values that we need to make sure that we maintain or even to enhance, that we have to be more complete. We have a discussion right now about diversity. That's important. That's something that we have to incorporate into the larger scheme of what we're working on. And so I think the reason why it hasn't just steamroller is that it's not just technology, it's also the culture. Culture changes a little bit slower than technology, and we have to work on the culture side as well as the technological side.
Let's talk a little bit about Holos. You mentioned this in the book, which seems to be related in a way to the Gaia theory, the Mother Earth, and this one Earth, and everything in it is one organism. Right. Explain for the audience what you mean by Holos and sort of where we're headed with this.
Yeah, so I kind of had to coin a term of the technium to describe the system of technology. So it's not technology is not a bunch of just gadgets or tools. It's actually the fact that you need a saw to make a computer, you need a computer to make a saw. The things are codependent on each other, that at this point in the world we have a very large system of technology, and the plural would be like the technium, and that technium has biases. But that technium is actually not the end thing. Right now we are making a world computer, the internet and all the devices that are connected, plus 7-8 billion people. So we have a system of human culture, 8 billion humans, plus a gazillion devices that are connected together, and those two things themselves form a new system. And of course, then we have nature and the whole planetary system that we are now a part of. Humans plus technology are affecting the globe. So those three things, the global Gaia, the global machine, and the global culture, form a three-part super system that I call Holos. And I think we're now at the point where we're understanding that these all parts are interconnected, that we do something here, it affects over here, and then over here affects us. But what we haven't done yet is actually to formalize and to recognize that this is not just poetry. I'm not just talking about a poetic metaphor. I'm talking about an actual real thing. We have a real superorganism of 7 billion people, 7 trillion transistors and servers connected together, and all the species on the Earth, and we have one system. It's a planetary system that has nature, humans, and machines together, and we should actually use that perspective to move forward.
And this is a change that'll happen in the world. This change we're talking about, maybe, taking care of the environment, taking care of people, more justice, less dictatorships. This is something that you feel or you've experienced will come from entrepreneurship and from individuals acting together, not nation states? Or how do you think we solve some of these large-scale problems? Because it feels like we live in a dysfunctional time on a government basis globally. Some governments seem more functional than others, but this ability to deal with, the tragedy of the commons and, everybody's individual plastic use doesn't seem like much, but we're pouring plastics into the ocean. It doesn't seem like we should be making any plastics except for very, specific use cases, but we can't get a handle on that. And we can't get a handle on this out of control nature of better, cheaper, faster. How do you think these problems get solved?
So I have a solution that it's not popular by any of my friends. My friends on the left hate it. My friends on the right hate it. Everybody thinks it's a terrible idea, and that idea is global governance. I think we absolutely need to have some form of global governance and government to solve government global problems. Planetary problems are going to require planetary governance, and the problem is that if any kind of global government that we can imagine is really kind of imagine a state government made bigger, and it's like we don't want that. I mean, it's like that's the worst, and it's very, very hard to imagine how we could have a democratic representative democracy for 7 billion people. How would that even work? And then we have the meta questions of like, well, who gets to decide what this government is, and who decides, and who decides, and so it's full of contradictions, paradoxes, dilemmas. There's going to be no perfect system. There's going to be no fair system, but we still need to have a system, because in its absence of us doing it deliberately, we'll do some ad hoc version that won't be optimized for anything. And so I think for my view is that the solution to some of this is not, yes, we need entrepreneur, we need individuals, but we also need the top down. We need to have a global governance. We need to have enforcement. We need to have a global police force. We need all these things that civilization requires. And nobody wants to take the first step. None of us can imagine what this could possibly look at. And then again, the dilemmas and the contradictions and the challenges are a lot, including like there would be no escape. There's like, here, if you don't like one country, you go live in another one. But if it's just one planet, what do you do? Well, so so there's so many challenges, but nonetheless, I believe you go to any other civilization in the galaxy, and they're going to have global governance, like Star Trek, right? So I think it seems like something to be thinking about and working on.
Yeah, that sounds like 100, 200-year worldview. Like, because we do have the EU, which is an attempt to have a group of disparate societies, and it is an arduous process for them of who's responsible for the unemployment of the people in Greece and Spain and Italy versus how productive they are in Germany, and they got the retire, just they can't even decide on retirement age. But it sounds like an actual great goal to have, in terms of a long goal. And if you think about how ridiculous it would be to think about a feudal system where, you travel through the countryside and different swaths of countryside are ruled by an individual, right? I mean, it seems insane to think of that person could make their own laws, but that's how it used to work as well.
Right. So I'm part of this group called the Long Now Foundation. What we're trying to do is encourage people to think long term. And I think it's actually an essential part of civilization and being civilized is that you think about things that may take longer than your own lifetime to complete, maybe even longer than a generation to complete. And we are the benefit of people who have built things to last for generations in the past. And I think that it's really time for us to embark on long-scale projects that may take a generation to achieve, and that at least that we can begin to imagine it. Because I think it's very hard to imagine it's very hard to build a future that is friendly unless you can imagine it. And I think this is right now, we're penalized right now by the gifted skills of storytellers in Hollywood, because dystopia always makes a better story. And so all our visions of the future are all dystopias. There's almost not a single optimistic view of the future on this planet that I can think of in a Hollywood movie. And I think that hurts us because people don't believe that the future is going to be friendly to them. And so we have to have a vision that we're working to in the long term to aim for in order to get it done. So part of what my role is to try to articulate what an optimistic view of the future would be so that we can actually try and work towards that to increase the odds that it would actually happen.
And you talk about in the book, and we can wrap up with this a bit, we're getting to a point where we have so many answers, and answers are so freely available, whether it's through Alexa looking stuff up for us, or Siri, or Google. And it's actually an interesting aside. You talked about how, this one Google search a day, would people you quantify in the book, or you discuss the quantification of what those searches mean with a $22 an hour average national salary. If it takes 15 extra minutes to get the results from the library, people are saving large amounts of money, and that they might even pay $1 per search on Google.
Yeah, well, how much would you pay if you had to pay for Google? I would pay an awful lot of money. I would certainly pay $500 a year.
Yeah, $20 a month is a no-brainer for the value you get.
Exactly, and so then you can kind of calculate what the value of this Google has been to society at large. But your point is that basically answers have become commodities. They're free. They're ubiquitous. They're almost worthless, and sometimes
Commoditized. Yeah,
they're commoditized. And so that means that what becomes valuable, what becomes precious, is questions. And so I think not too distant future, if you want an answer, you'll ask a machine. You're very simple. You just want to ask humans. You just ask machines for the answer, and they'll have very good answers, increasingly better answers. But if you want a good question, you'll come back to humans. And again, this goes back to what we're going to be doing, what our employment will be. Because I think things like, discovery, exploration, innovation, science, art, these are all basically ways to ask questions. These are all question-based. And they're not about efficiency. Machines are about efficiency. Machines are about productivity. If you have a job that can be described in terms of productivity, that's a job for robots. And humans are going to gravitate to things where efficiency is not a concern, which is a lot of the world. It's what innovation in science is. And innovation in science are inherently inefficient. Right. If you're getting perfect answers in science, my gosh, you're just not learning anything. If everything you make in a startup works, you're just not trying hard enough. Yeah. And so I think we're going to move to this world where questions become more and more important, and what you want to be taught in school basically is not how to have answers, but how to ask questions.
Hey, you hung out with some Amish people. You talk about that in the book a bit. What's their take on this massive technology sea change that's happening, and how are they managing that? Because it does seem without the internet, a world without the internet or without your mobile phone is impossible for most of us to conceive of operating in the real world, but yet they still do, or do they?
Well, it's just like we would say, can you imagine a world without electricity or artificial power? Right. And the Amish, they cheat a little. But the thing about the Amish is that they're actually hackers, or actually not Luddites. They're slow followers. They're kind of behind by 50 years. And to answer your question directly, in fact, they've sort of decided to adopt cell phones, but not smartphones. And the larger answer is that they're not anti-technology. They're just very, very selective about which technology they use, and they have two different attributes from the way that we adopt technology. The first is that they don't adopt it on an individual basis. You and I will decide what we're going to do and what we're going to use or not use, but they do it as a community. And because they do it as a community, they have to have some sense of what it is that they're trying to optimize or what the criteria are. And the criteria that they have, even though they haven't written it down, it kind of breaks down to two things, and that is, will this technology allow me to spend more time with my family and increase our community, strength of our community? So they rejected cars and went with the horse and buggy, stay with the horse and buggy, because the horse and buggy could only go 15 miles. That was the range. So they forced them to go shopping, visiting, entertainment, all within 15 miles within their community. It was a very deliberate thing. And the other things they do with one-room schoolhouses and whatnot is to actually enable them to have meals with their kids every meal, from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as long as the kids are home. Okay, so they have businesses in their backyards. Some of those businesses, like I was with the Amish family, they have a horse and buggy, the barn and stuff, and they've got a computer-controlled milling machine in the back barn, a state-of-the-art thing. So they've got solar panels using electricities and stuff, but their employment is in the backyard, so they can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. So they're selecting what they use based on how well it provides what they want, which is a strong community and a very strong families. So will they use what's coming along? Will they use more internet? very, very carefully. And the way they do that is they do it, which I really applaud. They do it by trying things. They let one or two the early adopter Amish, try things out, and the bishop says, "Okay, Ivan, you can use this, but we're all watching you, and we're going to see how this affects your family and your role in the community. And if we decide that collectively that it's harming your family relationship, then you have to give it up." And that's the bargain, and they will give it up if the community decides that it hasn't improved. But they tried it out by trying. So they have people who are trying the cell phone and smartphone, and everybody's observing them to see how it affects their behavior in the community family, and they give it up if it doesn't. And so, or they keep it and it spreads if it does encourage it. So right now they've got solar batteries, solar lights. They've accepted that. They have cell phones for most of them. They've done chainsaws. Some have electric bikes even. And so very, very slowly they are taking in things. They have Amish computers in some places, and Amish computers are PCs that are internet disabled.
They rip out the Ethernet. They crazy glue the port.
Exactly, they do. They do the whole thing. They make it impossible to connect, and so they use it for word processing or CAD problems in the office only. So you don't have them at home. They're just work things in the office, not connected. So they have, they're not Luddites. They're just very careful curators of technology with very deliberate goals in mind. In that sense, I find them admirable.
It is an admirable approach. When you think about it, a lot of families now are wrestling with the concept of screen time and how much time kids should be online. And you look at it, you're like, wow, Minecraft seems like a very good pursuit until your son or daughter becomes Minecraft obsessed and it becomes a massive addiction. I mean, the way kids will fight for for screen time is amazing. If you ever want a kid to eat vegetables or do math, it's pretty simple. I have a simple rule. Every minute of math you do, you get 2 minutes of screen time. My daughter loves math. All of a sudden, she's just thrilled with the concept of math. So overall, you're still an optimist. To recap, still an optimist. 51% of the world is good, 49% is bad. That's equaling good results. This is a very precise calculation you've done.
That's a massive sense of progress, that 2% delta. We can go to the stars with 2% delta.
Yeah, see, I agree with you. I'm just looking at it. I was talking to someone the other day. I was like, when you think about water and electricity and even some basic food, if you ask somebody how much they spent on water last year, they wouldn't know in all likelihood. And if you said, how do you get charged for electricity? What does it cost to charge your phone for the year? People don't know. So the cost is so de minimis for water and electricity that we don't even know what it is. It's sort of like some people, if they're affluent, you can tell how affluent a person is if you ask them what does a stamp cost. Some people just don't know. They're like, I don't know what a stamp costs. I don't know. Yeah, like I haven't been to a gas station in a long time. And it's...
You've been to it, but you don't even pay any attention to it.
You're not even paying attention. What did it cost to do it? I think it's one of these things that's a sign that we're on the right way, that we don't even think about electricity and water, two of the most precious commodities in other parts of the world. We've passed the idea that anybody has to worry about either of those things.
Yeah, and I think, but we haven't passed the idea that so many billions do have to worry about it. And that's the first kind of thing on the agenda, is to bring those rest of billions into it, so to the point where they're not worrying about it either. And I think we still have that opportunity to do that. And by the way, if you want to make money, that's a good way to make money, is going to those billions who are still left in poverty and helping them get out, because they will pay for this. They're very eager to have clean water and electricity on a dependable way, in education and healthcare. And so we have a lot to do, but I'm optimistic because we know how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's more of a, the Buckminster Fuller thing. We have enough food in the world. We just have to distribute it correctly.
Right.
But the things that are coming are all equally exciting and potentially powerful to people. And I think we have a moral obligation to increase the amount of technology in the world, because each new technology enables the latent talents of people who are waiting for us to invent their new thing, so that you can have more Van Goghs, more George Lucases and Alfred Hitchcock.
LeBron James and Da
Right,
Vinci's.
because they're waiting for us to make new technologies of a type that we don't have. So my little story is, imagine Beethoven being born before we invented the symphony or the piano. What a loss that would have been.
Right.
Or if Van Gogh had been born before oil paints, or Lucas before film. And so there's a Shakespeare alive today, somewhere in the world, and she's waiting for us to invent that new technology that would unleash her genius so she could share it in the world. And we have a moral obligation to try and provide not just the fresh water, the clean water, and the education for everybody, but also this new technology that will unleash all this powerful genius.
All right, so then I'll ask a final question, since we keep getting close to the end. I feel like I keep pulling the string. We're almost there. What do you think of capitalism now, having watched it, and the power of capitalism to spread these ideas and to spread this technology and to make it super cheap and affordable to everybody, versus the massive polarization of wealth we've seen? We never imagined somebody could be worth $1 billion, let alone 10, 50. Obviously, Bezos and some people will eventually become worth hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion, which makes no logical sense that anybody in the video game should get that many rewards. Or is it a beautiful thing because they wind up giving it all away? How do you reconcile what we've seen with what some people call out of control capitalism and other people call just a beautiful, violently fast capitalism?
Sure. I think if the only harm or the only error in capitalism was the fact that you have these super rich people, that would be a kind of a minor thing. I think that the problems or the challenges with capitalism are much more deeper than just a few super rich people. And by the way, the super rich, I think basically what that's an evidence of is that there's a devaluation of money, that wealth is sort of overrated. Wealth is going to become another commodity in a kind of a weird sense. That doesn't really matter. If you met these billionaires and their lives, for the most part, looks almost identical to someone with $10 million, right? I mean, it's like you can't possibly use that. And so it's in some sense it's meaningless to some degree. There's some political power, but we haven't figured out what that means. But if that was the only problem, I think that wouldn't be the main thing. There are many other inherent conflicts and dilemmas in capitalism, and I think simply we're just version 1. It's like we're going to amend this. We're going to deepen it. Technology is going to change it, just like it's changed everything else. Yeah. It's in the process of changing what we mean by this. So it's very obvious that capital itself is just one factor that you need. You mean many other things. There's ideas now about company stockholders having obligation not just to maximize shareholder wealth, but also shareholder commonwealth. And so I think we're in this process right now of making version 2.0 of capitalism, and there will be maybe we won't call it that, maybe we will, but there will be a focus on the many other ingredients that you need to have an increasing, prosperous, wide, deepening prosperity for the majority of people. And so I don't think, we know that's not communism. We know that doesn't work. But that means that there's still only a million other things it could be. And so I think we should be open to trying stuff. Right. Let's try universal basic income. It's an experiment worth trying. I don't think we can think our way through that. I don't think thinking about it will tell you whether it works or not. I think you have to try it. So let's do some experiments. Let's try, what other things. I think if things in the past haven't worked, I don't think we need to kind of keep, returning to them. Let's try some new experiments. So I'm very open to the idea that we should have economic experiments, and maybe some of them are run privately, maybe some of them are charter cities. I think the cities is a much better scale to try things in a country. Sure. Let's have as many countries as possible trying different things. Let's have universal right of mobility so that people can actually move easily to where something is working and that we can vote with our feet. I think we're just at the beginning of figuring out what's better than the current system.
I think that's a perfect place to end the conversation, because the book, The Inevitable, you sort of sum up the book by saying, like, listen, hey, this is up to us. And it's still early days. As much as people want to believe, like, oh my God, I missed the internet, this still feels like the first inning to you. We're just getting started. Getting to a couple of billion people or half the planet online is really just the start. We're still here in the infancy. You believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, there has, from the view of the past, there's never been a better time to start something than right now, because the tools have never been cheaper, more ubiquitous, more accessible globally for less money. And in terms of the future, there's never we will never have as many opportunities as right now, because there are no experts in AI. There's no experts in VR. There's no experts in the Holos. There's no expert in how you run something with 1 million collaborators. And so right now you can become the expert. So in short, my message is that you're not late. You're not late. This is the best time in the world to start something. Right now, this minute has never been better and never will be better as right now. So go ahead and start it.
On that note, everybody go buy the book, The Inevitable. You can get it on Audible. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever great books are sold. And go to kk.org and sign up. You have an RSS feed there. I don't know if you have an email list.
We have a new thing called Recommendo. It's a weekly newsletter where I send out, me and Mark Frenfelder send out the 6 little brief recommendations of cool stuff from this week, things that we have used, bought, listened to, watched, heard, been to, consumed, and it's one pager, very nice. Recommendo.
Recommendo. Love it. You're kind of a gadget head. You've always been, huh?
Yeah, I still have cool tools. We review a tool a day on the Cool Tools website, but this is shorter and briefer. So yeah, it's a whole earth catalog, do it yourself, make my own, build your own house kind of guy.
I love the fact that you're still positive and still tinkering and playing and thinking. Kevin, it's a pleasure to have a 70, 80-minute conversation with you, and everybody go buy the book. And thanks again, Kevin Kelly.
Thanks for hosting me, Jason. I really appreciate it. And you're a fantastic human because you ask great questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about what podcasting really is, it's an excuse to find an intelligent person and have an hour-and-a-half conversation with them, and then share it to the rest of the world who's interested. And people are like, "Oh my God, you do 100 episodes a year." I'm like, "Do you realize those are like of the 250 best moments of the year? That's about 50 to 100 of them are the actual podcast, because I'm just recording what would have been a lunch or a hike, and just a conversation with just somebody who's interesting. But it's because of how cheap it is to do interviews and video. We're capturing them for all eternity. These conversations. I mean, what was Shakespeare's lunch conversations like? Can you imagine the Shakespeare or the Da Vinci podcast? Da Vinci would have had this crazy podcast. We would have been able to hear what he was thinking and doing. The whole world would have been, the Amelia Earhart podcast about aviation would have been an amazing document to be able to read right now.
It's actually, that's a great idea for someone to do, is to do these imaginary podcasts.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Would that be cool?
It would be genius. You could literally hire an actor to say, "Hey, it's Amelia Earhart here, and this week in aviation, I'm going to talk a little bit about my trip to Fiji, and we've got some great photos and video of that. Can we pull up the Snapchat from our..." I mean,
wouldn't that be cool?
Hey, everybody, it's Genghis Khan. Hey, everybody, it's Napoleon. And this week in conquests. Of course, it would be so genius. It just actually what it should be is, it should be historical podcasts, and it should just be every week a different episode of a different person's podcast, as if they had one, right? Welcome to This Week in Christianity. I'm your host, Jesus H. Christ. Today we're going to talk about turning water into wine, metaphor or metaphysical. Oh, God. All right, Kevin, we can talk forever. Thank you for your time, and I hope to catch up with you soon in person. Cheers.